Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining on today's webinar with the IMechE on Hugo Mitchell-Heggs discussion on rowing across the Atlantic with HMS Oardacious. If I could firstly just introduce myself as the moderator of the session. My name's Mitchell Hunt. I'm also in the Royal Navy. I joined as an engineering officer around 10 years ago, and I've operated on it as an engineering officer on Vanguard class submarines, and I've really enjoyed applying a lot of engineering knowledge to that role in a range of challenging environments during my time. I'm a STEM ambassador as part of the organisation and enjoy CPD and training in as many different environments as I can to look at applying engineering across all areas of the organisation. This session is going to be 40 minutes of Hugo's description of HMS Oardacious and the row across the Atlantic. It'll last around 40 minutes and we'll take questions at the end. There is a box on the side of the screen, hopefully you'll see, for attendee questions. If I could ask you to just type it into the box and we'll take the questions at the end, and there'll be time to answer as many as we can. Okay, so the session is with Hugo Mitchell-Heggs. He's a Royal Navy engineering officer. I spent the last 10 years in the submarine service, leading teams of technicians operating and maintaining the nuclear reactor and ship systems in a range of deployments across the world. Hugo recently led the HMS Oardacious campaign, where 4 serving Royal Navy submariners rowed across the Atlantic in 37 days, becoming the fastest serving military team in history to row an ocean. Hugo is going to speak about success, mapping sea readiness, about resilience, and some lessons that they've learned across the vast Atlantic Ocean. In terms of his academic background, Hugo studied mechanical engineering at the University of Sheffield before undertaking a postgraduate diploma in nuclear reactor technology as part of the academic curriculum to qualify as a submarine pressurized water reactor supervisor. After spending 5 years on submarines, deploying on a range of patrols in excess of 3 months at a time, Hugo's been seconded to the MOD, where he's achieved chartered engineered status in 2018 while supporting the Submarine Delivery Agency's Astute Build program. Hugo is also currently a mental health champion in the Royal Navy Submarine Service and strives to raise awareness for mental health problems across the submarine community, challenging stigma and influencing cultural change to improve processes within the service and the wider community. Through this role, Hugo promotes and advocates the importance of mental fitness as a tool to become more resilient, motivated individuals and teams in everyday life. Okay, I'll now hand over to Hugo to discuss HMS Oardacious.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thanks for the introduction, and it's a pleasure and an honour to speak to my fellow IMechE members and for anyone else listening as well. And for those logging professional development, and if you're an IMechE member, this can be tracked in your career developer section of your online account. So firstly, thank you for having me, and notably to the IMechE. I've been supported by the institution since my time at university, so it really is a pleasure to give something back. And I appreciate that we've got a broad audience from a range of industries and professional backgrounds. So I do hope that this webinar offers you some value or some thought, maybe some concepts to take away, and if anything, provide maybe some entertainment too. There will be a couple of videos, and if the IT allows us and allows the sound to play, then we'll crack on with them. But if not, I might skip them and we'll just go straight into the Q&A bit later. So this talk, I'm going to kickstart off the webinar with a short video clip of our journey to the start. It's a 2-minute video that captures 18 months of work, which hopefully will give you a short, sharp idea of what I'm going to talk through next about that sea readiness element. I'm going to give you a quick context background about submarines and an introduction to what Royal Navy submarines do. I'll introduce our Atlantic Challenge. I'll talk about success mapping sea readiness, the process at quite a high level overview, and it can hopefully be applied to most activities, whether it's a project you're working on or if you're looking to plan your own project, expedition, activity or deployment. And my focus within that theme is all on resilience and how how we approach resilience, and I'll even share some tools that you might be able to take away and try in your own time. I'll then cover our 37-day ultra-endurance expedition rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, and particularly now, more importantly than ever, as we enter this really incredibly dynamic period of global transformation as a result of this pandemic. Hopefully some of our coping mechanisms will be transferable as well. If I don't run over my allocated time, we'll play this short video at the end and then go into some Q&A. So next slide is a video. Speakers on. If it doesn't work, Mitch, let me know and we'll skip it. Okay, so sound isn't working. Sorry about that. Will give us more time for Q&A at the end anyway. So just to give you a quick background to our environment, to submariners, the Royal Navy, we've been operating submarines for over a century, and we've always been at the forefront of underwater warfare, and we have built an enduring reputation for our professionalism and courage. Our platforms combine qualities of stealth, endurance, and flexibility, and these are characteristics which give us an unparalleled freedom to operate worldwide in support of national and coalition operations. To just give you that context of what we operate, we have two types of submarines. They're all nuclear powered. We have attack submarines, also known as hunter killers. You may have watched the old Gerard Butler film, which I can't vouch for their accuracy, but they're fitted with torpedoes, land attack cruise missiles, and their versatility is essential to provide safe waters for our deterrent submarine, or conducting reconnaissance, deploying special forces, intelligence gathering, or even hunting ships and other submarines. So they are really versatile, perhaps described as the Swiss Army knife of submarines. The second type from the image before you saw there was our nation's independent strategic nuclear deterrent, which is in the UK the Vanguard class submarine, and it will be replaced eventually by the Dreadnought program next decade. In fact, in 2019, we marked 50 years of unbroken service in maintaining a continuous at-sea deterrent. There was always one of our ballistic missile submarines at sea at all times for those 50 years. And these powerful units carry the Trident D5 ballistic missiles, our deterrent. So why am I telling you this? So firstly, all submarines being fitted with Rolls-Royce pressurized water reactors. These nuclear reactors utilize fission of uranium, the fuel that gives us a near unlimited endurance. We produce our own water, manage our own atmosphere without surfacing, keep our crews of around 150 people not just surviving, but thriving, which, as you can imagine, involves a significant array of planning, engineering, excellent process and culture to operate these complex multi-billion pound units. From an engineering perspective, you have to think we essentially cram missiles, fuel, high pressure systems, a nuclear reactor, and people inside a steel tube, sink it, and then send it into some of the most hostile environments on the planet. So what could possibly go wrong? But hopefully that will give you a background as to the complexity, and why we need to success map the way we do. And I could talk about this for hours, but for this webinar, I'm going to present the parallels drawn from our culture that we as submariners and engineers applied to this Atlantic rowing campaign. The Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. It's a 3,000-mile transatlantic rowing race from the Canary Islands to Antigua. It's been nicknamed the world's toughest row, and before signing up, you are warned to expect waves up to 20 feet high, salt sores, seasickness, and every submariner's worst nightmare, a lot of sunshine going just north of the equator. And with an expedition of this scale, or a project of this scale, it's all about getting the planning in a timely fashion. So we gave ourselves 18 months in advance to get ourselves started. Over the course of 18 months, we successfully developed a campaign to reach the start line. And I'll be honest, a lot of this isn't actually engineering. It's learning about PR and marketing, as well as the dark arts of social media. But you've got here our social media links at HMS Oardacious, where there's various other bits and bobs that we showcase. But other than the PR and marketing, it also involves working with charities. We fundraised over £110,000 for charity to provide mental health and well-being support to our community. It involves securing sponsors, and we were very generously supported by 52 corporate sponsors. And if you recognize your company's logo here, I'll just say a very quick thank you now. And if your company logo is not here, do not worry. We're about to kickstart a new campaign to row across the Atlantic again in 2022, 2023, and 24. And we welcome new partnerships. And I've left my contact details at the end of this presentation if you'd be interested in working together. But the focus of this talk is all about the next slide, and I use it for dramatic effect, the ultimate aim of our campaign. Here you go. HMS Oardacious, the Widowmaker, doesn't quite have a good ring to it. So this webinar's aim centers around this. Sadly, ocean rowing has taken a significant number of lives, and it still does. It's a harsh, extreme, unforgiving environment that can turn in seconds. But the deaths can generally have a common theme, and similarly to what we see in industry, is poor preparedness, poor culture, and the wrong kit for the wrong people. And we actively, as engineers, avoid cowboy attitudes and complacency in our organizations. As engineers, managers, and leaders, we acknowledge process, safety culture, and respect for the unknown. We don't take any of this for granted, or people get hurt, or worse, they die. And likewise, in the Royal Navy, we certainly don't send people out on deployments untrained on warships or submarines. So why would we do it on a rowing boat? Sea readiness, for us, is our bread and butter as Royal Naval Engineers. And we modelled and developed this HMS Oardacious success map on these processes that have evolved over decades to effectively deliver operational units whilst carefully managing all elements of risk to life. And I'm going to use the next few minutes to talk through the fundamentals we live and breathe. And some of you might recognize these as the simplest way of the METS pillars: manpower, equipment, training, and sustainability. This will form our baseline, and it's going to be our minimum to reach the start line. Manpower. It was about the right people for the right job, and my team consisted of engineers and engineering technicians. For this task, it was also about people who have the right attitude and mentality, a willingness to learn, being team players and dynamic leaders, and that's across the whole team. It's about selecting a team for this activity that's physically robust enough, but I knew who would mentally be able to handle the nasty bits, albeit with a bit of extra training. So I selected this team from the submarine service. I either worked with them or I've played sports with them in some form, and I knew firsthand that they would be the right people to not just collapse and have a whinge if it got a bit rainy or when they got a little bit tired. Goal setting as a team becomes a real part of your baseline, and you'll all see this in business. Goal setting only works if your team buys into it. So everything needs to become a team decision, wanting to get across safely, wanting to beat the army, or setting a time goal, whatever it was. Having that goal, agreeing to it and aligning to it, helped us plan a campaign and success map our hows and whys of getting to the start line. And goal setting as a team with buy-in is huge, but it has to be dynamic and it needs constant realignment. The goalpost will shift, so moving from your baseline needs to be part of your culture. And being a team that can openly and honestly communicate is one of those real fundamentals for any leader. Equipment. So this is the bit as engineers we love, isn't it? It's the kit that we use. We use a 28-foot glass fiber epoxy self-righting ocean rowing boat. It had 2 cabins, about 6 foot each, which was cozy considering our average height was 6'4", 6'4", 6'5". So just between 1.90 meters and 2 meters for our European friends listening. We had 3 solar panels to charge our lithium-ion batteries. And the importance of this obviously powered our auto helm, so that's what helped manage our steering and keep us on course without having to hand steer. Our navigation equipment, our communications kit, a reverse osmosis plant that produced 60 liters of drinking water a day. So the link between solar power and sustainability there is already one that we can start shining a light on. And we needed that water to survive and to look after our bodies and look after the boat as well. And because it's an unsupported crossing, we need to carry everything to be self-sufficient. I'm doing these in a slightly different order. I'm going to talk about sustainability next, and I'll jump onto this one. We packed for an endurance of 60 days worth of rations. We had over 1 million calories of food, which consisted of a range of dehydrated meals because you're trying to manage your weight. So having dehydrated meals means you just add water to the food, and it becomes 1,000-calorie meal at a time. We had wet rations as well for emergencies in case our water maker broke. We carried all sorts of extras like biltong, meal replacement shakes, nuts, cereal bars, and then junk. I can't emphasize the importance of junk. The sweeties that get you through the long nights without hallucinating, that just inject that element of morale. The sugar high that gets you through that dark night, so that whilst it serves no nutritional purpose, it's about putting a smile on your face and getting you through those hard moments. And we aim to consume between 6,000 and 8,000 calories each every day. But obviously waves of seasickness, exhaustion, and heat had quite an impact on our appetite. And this actually led to each of my crew losing, on average, 18 kilograms each during this crossing. We wedged that boat, that little boat there with the dolphins on it, with hundreds of items of safety kit, mandatory equipment, race compliance. But everything plays a part in not just surviving, but thriving. And the importance here, and I'll talk about this in the training element, is the ability to repair anything. Everything will go wrong. So it's all about taking the spares, whether it's electrical spares for the water maker, communications kit, having redundancy, having a backup plan, and training and rehearsing and expecting it. Going through your emergency operating procedures is exactly what we do on ships and submarines. So applying that culture to rowing the Atlantic was absolutely crucial. The mechanical elements, we're in an aggressive environment, whether it's the shock of being thrown around by a lot of by big waves or a lot of salt water. And as engineers and as any metallurgists amongst you, we know the electrochemical potential that seawater has, and it's just remarkable to see how quickly and aggressively it will eat through not just metal but our own skin. And then obviously the physical bits, having lotions and potions, sun cream, moisturizers, medical, antibiotics. Again, learning from experience. What breaks first? Our backsides, our hands, sunburn, infections. You looked at a third of our fleet that raced against us. A third of our fleet ended up needing to take antibiotics for one reason or another. And I did too. I personally had to take antibiotics during my crossing because of a skin infection, and it happens, and it's being ready to deal with it. And again, the body, like any mechanical object, needs that maintenance, fuel, that care, and that repair. This is one of the focuses of our webinar here today, and I'm put emphasis on training. I've broken training into 3 elements: physical, technical, and mental training. And I like to think of these 3 as 3 legs of a stool, and the idea that if a leg is missing, that the stool doesn't remain balanced. We often focus on technical competency in our everyday life, and you will, I'm sure, feel this is a familiar theme. Getting your grades at school, getting a degree, getting qualifications, accreditation, getting experience for the right job. This must sound familiar. We also place a huge importance on physical resilience or our physical ability. Whether it's that pressure to look good, or certainly for the military, it's incredibly important to have physical robustness. And it's important. It's good for our health. It's part of our well-being. It makes us. It gives us a good appearance. It helps our stamina, injury prevention, health, and it's important. And it's why we encourage ourselves to be active. Why we encourage ourselves to be healthy, to eat well, to do sport, to exercise. The physical has a close link with the mental as well. But to really optimize performance, there is such a huge mental element that is so often overlooked. You look at our self-confidence, our motivation, anxiety, attitude, mindset, and they all play a part on those two other elements that I mentioned a moment ago. And actually, when you look at elite sporting environments, 90% of performance can be attributed to mental factors. And we see this. You've seen the best team in the world choke on the big day. You've seen the favorites crumbling under pressure. And likewise, you've seen teams of athletes who get it, who harness it, who compartmentalize it, and who thrive. And they smash a record and deliver a great performance because they've incorporated this mental element into their preparation. Rowing an ocean is like any adventure. Climbing a mountain needs to start with LFE, and as engineers, this is the technical bit. Learning from experience, learning from errors, gleaning as much knowledge about what you get yourself into before you've committed, and if it's the right thing for you to be taking part in, or if it's just a whim. So learning campaign planning off those who've done it before. And this is my big tip, is no matter how big or small your ambition is, or your goal or your project, is to take advantage of LFE, that learning from experience. As engineers, we make it part of our culture. We learn and we improve from processes and cultures based on both the positive and negative from our predecessors. As military engineers, it's huge. It's how we improve. It's how we manage risk, and it's how we develop experience. So for me, for the Atlantic Challenge, I approached a number of previous crews. I approached world record holders. I approached elite athletes in completely different fields, and I absorbed whatever I could to build a success map. There were, of course, in the technical side of it, there was academic elements, navigation, seamanship, first aid, which great familiar themes that as Royal Navy officers and ratings we've experienced through basic training, but actually it's going to be in a different environment, so we had to pick this up and we had to adapt. Technical elements, this is the big bit, is the technical side could cripple a strong crew. And in hindsight, looking back at my crossing, had we not done this bit really well, our crossing would have been over before it even began. As submariners, we have a culture that focuses about knowing our kit. We spend years in the classroom learning how it works. And when we join a submarine, we trace every system. Whether you're the junior rating joining for the first time or you're the commanding officer, everyone needs to know how every bit of kit works, how to make it safe when things go wrong, and how to not have to wait for someone to fix it or deal with that situation, because that delay could lead to much more significant impacts on the rest of the crew. We also learn how to operate with contingencies. That's our bread and butter. We make ourselves go through that process of learning our kit, how to strip it down, how to fix it, how to patch it up. And trust me, honestly, in those first 100 miles off the coast, everything broke. And the conditions are so harsh. And I'm sure, again, reaching out to the metallurgists among you, you will agree that seawater will eat through everything. We also work with the weather forecasters, the Joint Operations, Meteorology and Oceanography Center, to understand the conditions that we would be expecting ahead of the schedule and based on historic data. And weather systems across the North Atlantic work in such a way that there's only a certain window or time of year when you can really get this optimum opportunity to cross the Atlantic without the weather conditions being against you. The physical element. We followed a strict weight gain-based strength plan comprising a lot of powerlifting and posterior chain development. Our boat's engines, getting big bums and big legs. A lot of conditioning from yoga, mobility, flexibility, and ultimately for injury prevention. This is our physical resilience. The body is a biomechanical system which, like any machine, needs rest, maintenance, fuel, and care. The previous picture you saw there was at the Institution of Naval Medicine, and their scientists there helped us test our physical and metabolic impacts that we would be experiencing, because we had to row 2 hours on, 2 hours off, all day, every day for over a month. And actually that resultant generated our calorie plan. We were predicted to be burning approximately 8,000 to 10,000 calories a day in that shift pattern, so nutrition obviously became a challenge. Eating triple your daily calorie intake is not as easy or as fun as it sounds. And then, of course, there's rowing. A lot of long endurance rowing, both on rowing machines and back and out on our boats, and experiencing the conditions and understanding the experience of monotony and the repetition and the attitude of just getting it done, even if it's a little bit wet and miserable. And for any of you who have spent any time on a rowing machine, I'm sure you'll agree it can be one of the most dull activities imaginable, but just that mental factor of just getting it done and preparing for those monotonous nights, and when you're a little bit tired, or doing it first thing in the morning when you've just got out of bed and not had anything to eat, or even when you feel a bit tired, it's just about getting it done. So that theme leads very nicely into the third leg of the stool, mental resilience. And mental resilience I knew would become a huge part of our campaign and our day-to-day jobs as submariners, as I imagine it would be for any of you as engineers, leaders, managers, and just normal people from day to day getting through the current climate in our day jobs and life in general. There are many definitions for mental resilience and many themes that it focuses on, but I like the simple approach that it's resilience is our ability to adapt in the face of challenging circumstance. It's also our ability to handle stress or adversity whilst maintaining a stable well-being. And it's our brain and body's response to stress and pressure. And it can be taught and it can be developed. And elements and mindsets that build resilience can be introduced into everyday life. So what you find straightforward and completely normal might actually seem overwhelming to someone else. As members of the armed forces and the submarine service, we incorporate it into everyday life, and it's why we train, it's why we do drills, it's how we create that muscle memory to deal with a task, whether it's a weapon drill or firefighting or nuclear reactor simulation or damage control. It's so that you can put yourself in that situation and just have that knee-jerk muscle memory response whilst your brain is trying to understand what's going on. And for me as a naval officer, I can honestly say that I wouldn't feel comfortable climbing into a compartment that's got a fire in it, because I'd done my basic training and advanced firefighting training, I've experienced through simulation that I can develop that trust in myself, in my kit, and it becomes a process that gives me the ability to deal with that challenging situation through an element of muscle memory and logical steps and trust in myself and my ability. And actually, there are a whole load of core pillars and themes and elements of learnt skill, previous experience, and actually some of it is just down to our personalities. So to manage our mental health and mental fitness and develop that resilience, as military, I mentioned that we incorporate it into everyday life, whether it's drills or leadership schools or even just adventurous training and sport, or our basic training, or just our day-to-day practice. And the aim of all of this, all these activities together, is to generate motivated, resilient individuals who can deliver that maritime defence. And as a mental health ambassador myself, and a mental health champion for our submarine service, I love that the military is moving towards mental resilience training and providing our people some tried and tested tools from professionals, taking in knowledge from other sectors, including elite sports, as I mentioned earlier, that 90% impact that it has on that mental factors have on performance. But I knew that this crossing would be much as much of a mental challenge as a physical and technical challenge, and even with our backgrounds. Therefore, back to step one I mentioned earlier, learning from experience. And for that reason, I built a great team to support us. I brought in an Olympian 3 times gold medalist rower, Peter Reed, OBE, also a naval officer, and he helped us look at mental factors from a team perspective. We workshopped goal setting using elite athlete approach. We used these to workshop and build team cohesion, self-confidence, motivation, and we managed. And it allowed us to set ourselves realistic goals and success map how to achieve them. We also built a friendship with the world record sailor, Sir Robin Knox-Johnson. He was the first man to sail solo around the world in the 1960s, spent 340 days isolated on his own, but we learnt lessons from him about, and from people like him, about achieving the extraordinary and the coping mechanisms that come with that. And of course, there's the academic elements. We worked with Dr. Jutta Tobias Mortlock from London City and Cranfield University, a psychologist who helped us develop mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises, which was a little bit new to us as military, as sportsmen. And I can't emphasize how useful these tools she provided us were in the environment we found ourselves operating in. And it helped improve our resilience. It helped us agree shared goals. It helped us build our values and culture as a team. And it helped us look at things like, no matter how bad it gets, keep laughing and embrace those horrible moments and know that those bad moments won't last. And those are the moments that you'll look back on, reminding ourselves how lucky we are, expecting challenges and expecting the worst and preparing for it in the best way possible. And obviously, this goes without saying, and this is the engineering approach I love, is that things are going to go wrong, and approaching it with the focus on a solution rather than assigning blame, rather than, I know this is easier said than done, but that is a big part of it too. So this is the bit I want to share with you to take away today is an online platform. Make a note of it, www.headfit.org. It's a mental fitness platform, and it's developed to help us manage our own mental fitness. It's worth checking out. It has been developed for the armed forces personnel, but it is so relevant, and any of you are welcome to use it. It's available on the public domain, and it actually harnessed quite a few mindfulness techniques that my team used and were taught by this Cranfield University professional. And it provides you everything from how to manage your stress, your drive, your confidence, and your mood, from body posture feedback, goal setting, positive self-talk, mindfulness, which is one of my personal favorites, as well as breathing techniques. And it helps us improve our own mental fitness. And you won't be surprised to hear that actually a lot of this was really relevant and really helpful during our crossing. So make a note of it. And if you want to talk about it, more than happy to chat through with any of you offline about our approach to mental fitness. I'm actually really pleased to be working and encouraging industry to a lot of our industry supporters to be using similar tools to this for their people. So there's a huge amount of relevance and overlap that is really exciting. Right, let's get on to the rowing bit. So 18 months later, our preparation and training expeditions had been completed. We put hundreds of hours in on the west of Scotland, experiencing the extremes of the Irish Sea and the calmness of the Scottish loch networks. And we found ourselves in the Canaries for 2 weeks for our final preparations of final tweaks and bits and bobs down there. We also met 36 other teams from all over the world, which also included our rivals from the British Army. There were 2 British Army teams and a strong Danish Army team. And ironically, the Danes became our main rivals, and they dominated quite a bit of the race with their skipper, a veteran of the previous year's crossing. And obviously, this is an element that became suddenly very new to us. We'd prepared, but there was this external factor of a competition, an invisible opponent that massively impacted our mindset and our focus in a positive way most of the time. We had our day zero, 12th of December last year. We pushed off. We had hugs and kisses with our loved ones. and a beautiful harbour exit, which I must admit, as submariners, we are not used to. I mentioned earlier that one might expect to see 20-foot waves out on the Atlantic. Well, within 6 hours, we saw 40-foot waves, and we're talking higher than a 3-story building here, beating down on the stern of the boat, and this summarised our first 2 weeks, and I've never seen anything like it in the 10 years that I've been in the Navy. It was like living on a log flume at a water park for 2 weeks, and that's where we knew our safety culture as a team had to be rigid, that we had to clip our waist harnesses to the safety line before we ever stepped a foot on deck and police each other, look after each other, have that teamwork, that responsibility, especially as soon as sleep deprivation and hallucination comes in. That's when it's the easiest to start being complacent and start taking shortcuts, and that's where things go wrong. And then we see exactly that in day-to-day life, don't we, is when people start taking shortcuts because they're a bit tired or a bit anxious or a bit stressed, and that's where accidents start to happen. And we also faced technical issues really early on. Our steering broke, our auto-tillers, we had 2 of them, one of them broke. And because of that environment, we knew as engineers that we had to have aggressive defect prosecution and rectification. That teamwork allowed us to somehow keep our auto-tillers alive and going until we got to Antigua. Here we go. This is a nice little shot of state of our hands. I'd show you a photo of our backsides, which looked much worse. Probably not appropriate for this presentation. We rode in shift of 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and we tweaked that only slightly as the temperatures changed. The crossing was a physical roller coaster, and it broke our skin, and it gave us salt sores on parts of our bodies that I would dare not share with you. But with the lows came the highs of seeing 1 million stars every night, shooting stars, the biggest thunderstorms we've ever seen, which were just, apocalyptic, but the most beautiful things as well. And of course, wildlife, hundreds of dolphins, sea turtles, pilot whales, flying fish. We had flying fish diving out of the water, being caught by the wind and hitting the boat and landing on deck and hitting us in the face. And in fact, it's not unknown for ocean rowers to get concussion because of flying fish. Absolutely terrifying. And then our highlight was a humpback whale, mother and calf, that came by one night very peacefully, about a meter away from our boat. Just curiously for 10 minutes, have a look at what this funny, strange, floaty thing is in the water, and then disappeared again into the night. And here we go. This is one that the main bit before we finish this is the lessons. And this is LFE for you, learning from experience. That the coping mechanisms that helped us may help you, your friends, families, colleagues through the new normal. Firstly, interaction. My team and I, we had each other. We worked hard to show empathy and compassion the harder things got, and we did that without judgment. But we also had a satellite phone to call home, and it allowed us to have a bit of therapy, an outlet to share our highs and lows with our loved ones. And this is my tip, is that no matter at the moment, I know the dynamic is shifting, but pick up the phone and make those connections to those who at this time are feeling maybe scared, isolated, lonely, anxious. And we need to be there for each other and know that one might not be feeling this new normal, that it might be that you might be have a heightened resilience, but it might be overwhelming for someone else. So remember that, that problem shared is a problem halved, and talk to each other and look after each other. There's routine. As service personnel, we thrive on it. We love a battle rhythm. We love structure. And it's about breaking the timeline down into manageable milestones. Same with a project. You break it down into manageable milestones. We had 3,000 miles, and we broke it down by day into rowing shifts, into 100-mile, 500, halfway, Christmas, New Year's, and so on. And then likewise, you've got your day-to-day, whether it's your shift, your rest period, washing, meal preparation, making water, route checking, maintenance, cleaning. All those bits fed into our daily routine and helped us break this enormous journey down into manageable chunks. So our transition to the new normal is much like an ocean crossing, where we've got milestones and behaviors that will define success. More importantly, we've got to maintain sight that there was a start when all this kind of kicked off, like our start line, and then there will be a finish where suddenly things will shift to a new normal. And everything that happens in the middle, with our culture, with our behavior, that influence will help define what the finish line is going to look like. Physical well-being. We did plenty of rowing, but actually looking after our body, that self-care. Resting it, treating it well, hydrating, feeding, stretching, all that stuff. And it helped look after our minds and our bodies, because otherwise we'd have broken so quickly. And likewise, in this new normal, it's about looking after our bodies, because it's directly linked. That leg of the stool, we have to look after ourselves. Nutrition feeds into that, but nutrition has another element to it. It's not an opportunity to connect, to speak to others, to treat it like a special moment where you can step aside and forget the day or reset, even if it is a rehydrated cold chicken korma in the middle of the Atlantic. It's important to make time for it. Mental stimulation, and this is away from work, stepping away from your normal day-to-day and keeping your mind stimulated, keeping neural pathways busy. It helps us manage stress. It helps us fight the mundane. And it removes that experience of Groundhog Day, of every day being the same. And we used podcasts. We were limited with what we could do, but we had podcasts. We did karaoke. We did audiobooks. In fact, we listened to The Lord of the Rings on audiobook, and we still haven't finished it. It's probably the longest book in the world. Probably do 2 Atlantic crossings on The Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I think we got to Antigua just as they were leaving the Shire. Hygiene, personal hygiene. I don't need you to teach you to suck eggs here. Obviously, self hygiene helps us avoid infections and diseases and virus, but actually that home care, that ship's husbandry is essential, because our living space, that deck, you can see us there looking a bit grubby, but that deck was our dining room. It was our shower. It was our toilet. One of us would quite happily be eating whilst one of us would be sat down pushing one out over the bucket. You have to look after your space. You have to take pride in it, make it somewhere that you want to exist in and want to work. And I'm sure some of you are seeing that, where bedrooms and dining rooms have been converted into offices and dining rooms and art studio, whatever. It's about having that personal pride in that space that you're working in. And then finally, fun. And fun is what keeps us together and binds us, gives us that humor through the darkest of times, whether it's capsizing on a 30-foot wave, doing 17 knots, or getting smashed by rogue waves, or hit in the face by flying fish. Fun boosts our immune system. It helps us manage stress, mood, and morale. So fit it in and make it part of your routine. That was our route. It was a tight race. 37 days it took us. It was a game of cat and mouse, of a lot of overtaking. We were really lucky. We had a great crossing. We suffered some issues early on, and we had to realign our goals a few times. But in the end, we finished in 37 days. We actually finished 2 hours in front of our Danish army rivals and 6 hours in front of the British Army. So, this isn't a format for a forum to talk about marginal gains, but there you go. If there's ever an opportunity to mention marginal gains and just the slightest adjustments that helped us get in those couple of hours earlier, what a difference that made. That's Antigua. I've never been to Antigua before, but it's a wonderful place to finish. You finish past, there's a little fort down there where my mouse is, and you come in through this 10 miles of coastline, and to see these multi-million-pound super yachts blaring their horns as you're coming in before you see your family really is a special thing. Mandatory finish line photo, and another big thank you to all our sponsors who supported us. Really, really special place to finish and have that moment with your team where you can just stop and realize what you've achieved. So with the video, I've overrun timing wise. That's the finish line there. IMechE there. Thank you very much. I'll skip over this video. We can, if anyone wants to see it separately, send me a message. I'm more than happy to share it. Or it's also on our social media platform. But without further ado, look, I thank you so much for listening to this webinar. And I invite any questions, and I know Mitchell's going to moderate this now. So if you ever want to get in touch or check out our website, it's there, or that email address there. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Hugo. I think everyone would agree that that was a very insightful into the incredible physical and mental challenge of the Atlantic row. Certainly not something everybody would be willing to undertake, but a great insight into how you applied your engineering attitude and processes that you've learned through your professional experience so far, and applied them to develop the success map that gave the outcome for the challenge that was so successful. Just a reminder to all the participants, the question box is still open if you want to ask any questions. I do have a few, so I will make a start. The first, Hugo, is to discuss learning from experience, lessons learned, whatever name the particular organisation gives to it. But a few questions, one from Duncan Sterling and one from Hugh Walker on lessons learned from the trip that you did and what you would do for next time. So one is on improvements you would make to the boat design, and another is lessons that you've taken on board for the next row from the team, I believe, that won.
Changes to the boat design. That's actually a really good question. The boat was fantastic, and it allowed us to self-right when we capsized. We're in a great place where they've gone through enough iterations of this platform where it's evolved based on errors from the past, and we were very lucky. I think we having seen some teams really struggle with power. That's one that I would always focus on, is making sure that you've got a robust ability to generate power, and lithium-ion batteries was certainly a big step forward. But personally, I think the biggest issue we had was autotillers. Again, ocean rowing is still quite a niche industry, so having something, a course, a method of being able to maintain your course without needing human interaction is still really difficult. We adapted autotillers from the sailing world, so Raymarine kit, but it's still quite niche and overheated and needed changing regularly. And that one of them broke very early on, which caused us one hell of a headache of repairs and trying to get through that. So definitely autotiller is one big change I'd make for the next time I row the Atlantic in 2022. So what was the next question, Mitch?
I think that covers LFE. We'll move on to a few because we've got quite a lot to get through. So if we touch on some of the topics. Sure. One question is from Stephanie. You mentioned the lows and highs of the voyage. Which was the biggest high and the biggest low?
I'll start with the biggest low. It was actually, ironically, we took a route. We took a gamble by going quite far north on our route, which we thought would pay off and give us an advantage. And this is where I mentioned earlier the race element. And we ended up getting stuck in headwinds, so we were getting blown backwards or only just making a few nautical miles a day. And all the teams that we'd worked hard to stay ahead of for our first 2 weeks started overtaking us. So being able to realign your goals was really difficult. That was one of our big things. There was a moment probably about halfway that we knew that the winning was going to be not achievable. But then seeing what realigning and working out what our new goal was going to be, and then changing our planning was big. So getting through that was quite hard. It was the competition element for us. But the high, anything to do with wildlife, because the ocean is a desert of vast desert where you don't see anything, and suddenly you'll see a whale or a dolphin or a sea turtle. So rarely, but it's just so special because it's this connection with the marine world. We had this amazing day where I think there must have been between 50 and 100 dolphins appeared just out of nowhere. We were all just about we just got past that difficult few days where we weren't making any ground, and that was just marvelous. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. Good question.
That's fantastic. Just on the same theme there, Hugo. George is wanting to know, how did you feel a couple of days after the completion, and was there a bit of a feeling of what now? Is there a further challenge to do?
Completely, definitely. Antigua is a very nice place to go and reflect. There could be worse places to go and have a moment of rest and recovery and try and start putting some body weight back on. But doing something like this immediately opens the door to the gateway to what's next. What do you want to do? And for that exact reason, that's why I'm going to do it again in a couple of years' time. Because it wasn't just the journey that was incredible, the actual row itself, but the journey to the start line, engaging with people and speaking and preparing and training and learning is all part of the journey, and it's so much fun. But no, it does take a while, and you do see this in elite environments where it's very easily to have that post climatic blues, that mental struggle of I've done this, what's next? And my advice for anyone who's just achieved something huge is definitely to start setting themselves small goals, just small ones to start, but just something to keep the mind busy. Because as soon as you finish and you go into a void of nothing, that's where it gets very difficult. So I'm just starting off. For me, it was all about just getting back to a bit of exercise, just simple things, just to keep things ticking over, and then start thinking about some small challenges before we take on the Atlantic in a couple of years' time.
Okay, thank you, Hugo. I've got a few questions on some of the practicalities and the equipment involved. So a number of questions. First is there a ship spec for the boat? Is that common to all? And also a question on the total costs of procurement of the boat, training, and the project as a whole.
Good question. There are to take part in this particular challenge, in this particular race. Yes, there are specifications, and they all revolve around safety and not having too much of an advantage with windage, surface area of the platform. There's generally, they used to nickname them two classes of boats, pure class and concept class. And the pure class one that we didn't use is the old-fashioned V-shaped hull, which offers much more stability. But everything needs to be self-rightable and have the adequate amount of cabin storage and safety equipment and so on. And likewise, our boat, the concept class, the reason it's that model has got so many world records is that it's got a flat bottom, which means it can surf. It can surf waves, so you gain this huge speed advantage as soon as you hit any heavy wavy conditions. Sorry, what was the next bit, Mitch?
And the next part was the costs of the equipment and the project as a whole.
It depends. It depends on your budget and obviously the size. But for a 4-man crew, you can. I always advise to go second hand because you learn about how to repair your boat immediately. But you're looking at anywhere between £80,000 and £130,000. We would have bought a second-hand boat, but we ended up buying a new one because we joined. We signed up too late. There were teams who'd been planning for 2 to 3 years who'd got hold of their boat, and there was a shortage of second-hand boats at the time. So that's one of my recommendations as well. Is always go second-hand.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question is from Peter Hill, and it's to do with team selection. Do you feel like you got it right with your team members, or was there any members not the perfect team member?
I think that's a good question, and I did get it right. We all added strengths, and we all had strengths and weaknesses, but it's about having the right balance to complement each other. I had a good team. They were good guys, and they all had, whether it was their ability to solve problems or just get through the night or inject morale, the balance worked really well. And the important thing was coming off the boat at the finish, enjoying each other, not resenting each other. And you hear that so many times as teams that go through this huge challenge and come out different at the other end and go their separate ways. And what was really special is that we all finished and wanted to spend time together. And Antigua was a great place to reflect together as a team. But no, team selection, I think, is really important to get people who are not just like-minded, but who are going to put the work in, who are going to contribute, add value. That's what it's all about. And I feel very, very blessed and very lucky that I had a great team.
And did you find different team members responded differently throughout the challenge, and the focus was on different people in the team to kind of leave and pick up morale? And would that apply to a workplace, do you think, Hugo?
Absolutely, and every single one of us had our bad day, and that's where we were all motivated by different things. And this is that thing about goal setting, is that you agree a shared goal, but then you have to recognize that everyone's motivated differently. So it might be something. I'll give an example here. Is I was incredibly motivated to obviously beat the army and do as well as possible, but I was motivated by our daily stats report and our mileage and our route and a very technical aspect to the race, whereas others were just enjoying the process of being out on the ocean and didn't want that external element. So how you then harness and motivate two separate people to achieve the same goal, but who are motivated differently, is the challenge. That's where teamwork comes in, and that's where knowing each other, recognizing that you're motivated by different things is really important. Don't get me wrong, we all had our bad days. We all had a tantrum at some point, but that was expected. We planned that in. You know that, and you know that you're going to have a bad day and a tantrum, and you set yourself rules. You can't sit on it. You can't mull it over. You can't overthink it, and you certainly can't ever let it get physical. But we had a rule of you sleep it off, and then you come back and the slate's clean. So we had a few bickers, and you can go and have your 2-hour nap, but 2 hours later, that bicker is forgotten about, and you move on. And it will be over stupid things like eating each other's muesli by accident, or disagreeing over what flavor of chicken korma to have next. But things as simple and as stupid as that became a big deal in that strange environment.
That's great, Hugo. I think we've probably got time for one or two more questions. Question from William Wildsmith on: were you always in sight of the other boats?
We saw no one. You see the other boats maybe for your first couple of hours leaving the Canaries, and then we never saw. In fact, we didn't see another human being for 36 days. We came across a yacht the day before we finished, and they actually had just seen the Danes just behind us. So it was a nice little kick up our backsides to go, the Danes are hot on your tails, guys. It was quite good fun for us as well. But it was just us. So they had this invisible opponent, but we saw nothing. We saw maybe a few cargo ships over on the horizon, but too far away, and we had no interest in getting any closer to them because it's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Did you have any means of knowing how you were progressing compared to the other teams?
Yeah, that was the advantage of having a satellite phone. We had a daily check-in with our race. We had a race manager for us, a support team manager who sent us a text message to our Iridium phones that just said who's in front of us, who's behind us, our average mileage for the day. Point this way, or help us with our routing from our satellite AIS system. But no, that was no visual of anyone. It was just about what we were getting told and assuming that we were getting accurate data.
Yeah, I can imagine the challenge of motivating when you can't see where the other teams are is very great at times. Okay, have we got time for one more question, Hugo?
Go for it.
Henry Cook asks, did you have any hallucinations at any time? And what were some of the other challenges with sleep deprivation?
The sleep deprivation for the first week, a combination of the heat, sleep deprivation, and and adapting to our environment killed our appetite. So we really struggled with food for the first week. I mentioned earlier that we were expecting to be burning about 10,000 calories a day. And for my first 5 or 6 days, I was struggling to get much more than 3,000 calories in my body. So I lost weight so fast. But and obviously the exhaustion from that also will contribute to hallucination. Sleep wasn't too bad. We were quite lucky. We're very. I think this might be our strength as submariners, is you get very used to sleeping in odd shift patterns. So you know that if you're on your back and you've got time to get your head down and have a sleep. So every now and again, you would maybe hear things that you couldn't. It wasn't obvious things. It wasn't psychedelic. It was just you might just see a wave breaking and think it was another boat, or the number of times we might have seen a whale or a dolphin at night time, but it was just a wave. Simple things like that. But that's why you always have two of you on deck. You look after each other, and one of you is always going to be exhausted. So you use the other one to keep the other one going, and talking's really helps with getting oxygen to the brain, and avoiding those nasty moments.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Hugo.
Thank you very much.
I'll just see if we've got any more questions coming in. I don't think we have any new ones. So I think if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to, Hugo, thank you very much for your time and your insight into the role and how that can apply to engineering environments and in the workplace. And also interesting to hear how you applied your engineering knowledge to your approach and developing that success map for the team and the equipment and the challenge as a whole. So thank you very much. I'll give you an opportunity to give some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mitch. And it's a real pleasure to speak to all of you. Look, if I haven't answered any of your questions, you've got my email address there. Send it in. I'll do my best to answer in any way I can. And thanks again to Natalie and the rest of the IMechE team for inviting me to speak today. I hope you all stay safe through this new normal and look after each other. Thanks again and take care.